I walked into the kitchen that evening, carrying a load of laundry from the dryer, when I heard Alex's voice from the living room. He was on the phone, speaking louder than usual because he thought I was still upstairs. The door between the rooms was slightly ajar, and I paused without thinking, folding a towel while his words carried through clearly. "Yeah, man, I'm just biding my time until Mom kicks the bucket. Then the house is all mine. It's worth at least $500,000 now, with the market the way it is. I can sell it quick and pay off my loans." His tone was casual, like he was discussing a business deal, not his own mother's death. He laughed then, a short bark, and added, "She's 62, healthy for now, but you know, anything can happen. Heart issues run in the family. Dad went at 58. I stood there, the towel half folded in my hands, staring at the floor tiles I'd scrubbed clean just last week. The phone call continued with him complaining about his job at the auto shop, how the house money would let him start his own garage. He had no idea I was listening, didn't even glance toward the kitchen. "My name is Susan Reynolds, and I'd raised Alex alone after his father died in a car accident 15 years ago. I'd worked 2 jobs back then, waitressing days and cleaning offices nights, to keep this roof over our heads. The house was a 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb, bought with the settlement money from the accident. I'd refinished the hardwood floors myself one summer, sanding them down over weekends while Alex played video games in his room. Now, at 35, he still lived here rent-free, saying he was saving up to move out. I didn't make a sound. I finished folding the laundry quietly and went back upstairs, my steps slow on the carpeted stairs so he wouldn't hear. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, the basket at my feet, and replayed his words in my head. No anger yet, just a numb shock, like when I'd gotten the call about my husband's crash. Alex finished his call and turned on the TV downstairs, the sound of a basketball game filling the house. That night, I lay awake until 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling fan's slow rotation. By morning, I decided not to confront him directly. That would only lead to denials or arguments. Instead, I started planning my exit on my own terms. I contacted an estate lawyer first, someone recommended by a neighbor who'd gone through a divorce. Over the phone, I explained I wanted to update my will and explore options for my assets. We met in her office downtown, where she laid out the details. I could sell the house, but to do it without drama, I'd need to handle Alex's residency carefully. Over the next few weeks, I quietly began the process. I hired a real estate appraiser to value the property discreetly, scheduling the visit while Alex was at work. The appraisal came back at $510,000, higher than I'd expected due to recent neighborhood developments. Then I listed the house privately through a broker who specialized in quiet sales to investors. No open houses, no signs in the yard, just targeted outreach. Meanwhile, I started clearing out my personal items bit by bit. I rented a small storage unit across town and moved boxes there on days when Alex was out. Old photo albums, my jewelry, winter clothes I wouldn't need right away. I sold some furniture online, piece by piece, the guest bed, the old dresser in the basement, telling Alex it was just decluttering when he noticed. He didn't question it much. He was too wrapped up in his own routine. The buyer emerged after a month, a real estate firm looking to flip properties in the area. They offered $495,000, all cash, with a 30-day close. I accepted, signing the papers in the lawyer's office. On closing day, I had a locksmith change the locks while Alex was at his shift. I sent him a text from the airport. "House sold. Time for you to stand on your own. Goodbye." The money hit my account as I boarded a flight to Europe, where I'd always dreamed of exploring the countryside. I'd arranged a short-term rental in a small village in Italy through an online service, using part of the funds to cover the first few months. As the plane lifted off, I felt a mix of liberation and sorrow, wondering if Alex would ever understand the lesson I'd left him. Subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Let me share how I got here, because this story didn't start with that phone call. The plane touched down in Rome at 7:15 a.m. and I stepped into the terminal feeling like I'd aged a decade overnight. The 10-hour flight had been restless, my mind stuck on Alex's voice, the click of the new locks on the house, the text I'd sent him from the airport. My duffel bag, heavy with just a few clothes, my passport, and a small notebook, was all I carried. In that notebook, I'd written the address of a rental cottage in Montefalco, a village in Umbria I'd chosen after weeks of online research, inspired by a faded postcard I'd kept from a friend's trip years ago. At 62, I was finally chasing a dream, but it felt more like running away. The cottage was a modest stone building, one bedroom with a creaky bed, a kitchen with a temperamental gas stove, and a bathroom where the shower head dripped. The landlord, Paolo, a man in his 60s with a quick smile, picked me up from the train station in a dusty Fiat. He pointed out vineyards and a medieval church as we drove, his English halting but kind. The view from the cottage, golden hills dotted with cypress trees, made my throat tighten, but not with joy. It was too quiet, too foreign, too far from the life I'd known. That first week, I threw myself into survival. I bought a prepaid phone from a shop in the village, since my American plan was useless here. At the Thursday market, I navigated stalls with my rusty Italian, buying bread, a bag of tomatoes, and a wedge of pecorino cheese. The villagers nodded politely, but their rapid conversations left me dizzy. At night, I sat on the cottage's small patio with a glass of cheap wine, staring at the stars. I'd wanted to start over, but this felt like being erased. The absence of my old life, Alex's TV blaring, the hum of the dishwasher, the familiar squeak of my front door, was a void I didn't know how to fill. Then the emails came. Alex had my old email address, the one tied to the utility bills. The first arrived 4 days after I landed. "Mom, what's going on? The house is locked and some realtor says it's sold. Where are you?" His tone was sharp, accusing, as if I'd stolen something from him. I didn't respond. The second email, 2 days later, was angrier. "You had no right to sell it. That was my home too. You owe me answers." By the third, he sounded desperate. "Are you even okay? Just tell me where you are." I read that one on my laptop, the screen's glow harsh in the dark cottage, and closed it without replying. The climax hit on my 9th day in Montefalco. I was walking back from the market, a canvas bag of groceries slung over my shoulder, when my new phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I answered, expecting Paolo about the leaky shower. It was Alex. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking with fury. "I found the travel agency receipt in the trash before the movers came. A plane ticket to Rome? You're in Italy? You sold our house and ran off?" My stomach dropped. I'd tossed the receipt in the kitchen bin the day I left, assuming the trash would be gone before he returned from work. I hadn't thought he'd dig through it, hadn't realized he'd be desperate enough to search for clues. "You can't do this," he went on, his voice rising. "That house was my future. You think you can just vanish and take everything?" I stood still on the narrow dirt path, an older woman passing by with a basket of figs giving me a curious glance. My mouth was dry, but I found my voice. "Alex," I said, "you made it clear what you were waiting for. I'm done waiting." I hung up, my hands trembling as I shoved the phone into my pocket. The groceries felt heavier, the sun too bright. That night, I sat at the cottage's wobbly kitchen table and opened my notebook. I wrote a list. Enroll in an Italian class at the community center, find a local art group, visit the Roman aqueduct I'd read about in a guidebook. It was a start, a way to anchor myself. But as I closed the notebook, a question lingered like a splinter. Could I build a life here, or would the ghost of what I'd left behind follow me forever? Weeks blended into one another in Montefalco, each day a quiet battle between solitude and discovery. Mornings started with coffee from the mocha pot I'd bought at the hardware store, its bitter steam filling the cottage as I watched the sun climb over the hills. At 62, my body reminded me of its limits, aches in my knees from the uneven paths, a stiffness in my shoulders from carrying groceries uphill, but there was a rhythm to it, a simplicity I'd never known back home. No more rushing to the supermarket after work, no more wondering if Alex would be home for dinner. Just me, deciding what the day would hold. I enrolled in an Italian class at the village community center, a low building with peeling paint and flyers for local events pinned to the door. The teacher, Maria, was a woman about my age, with silver hair tied in a bun and eyes that crinkled when she laughed. There were 6 of us in the class, 2 young backpackers from Germany, a retired couple from England, and me. We met twice a week, practicing phrases over tea and biscotti. "Buongiorno, come sta?" Maria would say, and I'd repeat it, my tongue tripping over the vowels. It was humbling, starting from scratch like that, but it felt good, reminded me of when I'd learned to balance the checkbook after my husband died, one entry at a time. One afternoon after class, Maria invited me for a walk. "You seem far from home," she said in careful English as we strolled through the olive groves. I nodded, not ready to share the full story, but I told her about losing my husband young, raising a son alone, the endless shifts at the diner and office cleaning jobs. She listened, her arm linking with mine. "I know that life," she replied. "My husband passed 10 years ago. I worked in a factory, sewing clothes, to keep my daughters fed. Now they live in Rome, busy with their own families." Her words hit close. I could see myself in her, the quiet strength, the unspoken regrets. We talked about the small things that kept us going, a good meal, a sunset, the satisfaction of a clean house. By the time we parted, I felt less like a stranger. Back at the cottage, I started cooking more, using recipes from a second-hand book I'd found at the market. Simple things, pasta with fresh tomatoes and basil from the neighbor's garden, a salad with olives I'd picked myself on a hike. Eating alone wasn't as lonely as I'd feared. It was a chance to savor, to remember meals I'd rushed through for years, but evenings brought the emails. Alex's messages had slowed, but they still came. "Mom, I moved in with a friend. It's cramped. Why won't you talk?" One night, after a glass of wine, I almost replied. I typed out a message about his phone call, how his words had cut deeper than he knew, but I deleted it. What good would it do? He was 35, old enough to figure it out. The turning point came during a village festival, the Sagrantino wine harvest celebration. The streets filled with tables, lanterns strung overhead, music from accordions and guitars. Maria dragged me along, insisting I try the local wine. "Life is for living, Susan," she said, handing me a glass. I mingled awkwardly at first, but then I met Elena, a widow in her 50s who'd moved from Milan after her kids left home. She ran a small art studio, teaching pottery and painting. "I sold my apartment," she confided over plates of roasted pork. "My son wanted me to stay, to babysit his children, but I needed my own air." Her story mirrored mine, the expectations from family, the guilt of choosing yourself. We laughed about it, the absurdity of being seen as done with life at our age. That night, inspired, I signed up for Elena's painting class. My first session was a mess, brushes slipping, colors bleeding, but it unlocked something. As I painted the hills outside my window, I thought of all the years I'd put dreams on hold, the art supplies I'd bought once and never used, the trips I'd postponed. Now, here I was, creating for no one but me. Yet, as the paint dried, a pang hit me. Would Alex ever understand? Or was this the end of us? Months passed in Montefalco, and the cottage began to feel like home, a place where I could breathe without the weight of expectations. My Italian improved enough to chat with the baker about his grandchildren, and my paintings, crude at first, now captured the subtle shifts of light on the hills. Elena's art classes became a weekly anchor where we'd gather around a long table, hands covered in paint, sharing stories of lives reinvented. "You're blooming, Susan," Elena said one day, admiring my latest piece, a vibrant olive tree under a stormy sky. I smiled, but inside I knew the roots were still shallow, easily uprooted by memories of Alex. The emails had stopped after I changed my address, but the silence was its own torment. I wondered if he'd moved on, found his own path, or if my disappearance had hardened him further. Maria, sensing my unrest during our walks, shared more of her own story, how her daughters had resented her for moving to the village after their father's death, accusing her of abandoning them. "They came around eventually," she said, squeezing my hand. "Time heals, but forgiveness starts with you." Her words lingered, stirring a mix of hope and doubt. I started journaling, pouring out the what-ifs. What if I'd confronted him that night? What if he'd apologized? It was therapeutic, like unclenching a fist I'd held tight for too long. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, the climax shattered my fragile peace. I was in the market, bargaining for chestnuts, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Mom?" I turned, my heart slamming against my ribs. There stood Alex, disheveled from travel, a backpack slung over his shoulder, his eyes wide with a mix of anger and desperation. The villagers around us continued their chatter, oblivious to the storm brewing. How did you find me?" I stammered, the bag of chestnuts slipping from my hand. He stepped closer, his voice low but intense. "I hired a private investigator, used some of my savings, tracked your flight, then asked around in Rome until I got leads to Umbria. Villages talk, Mom. Someone remembered an American woman renting a cottage." His face was gaunt, shadows under his eyes, and for a split second I saw the boy he'd been, the one who'd clung to me after his father's funeral. But then his expression hardened. "You left me with nothing. No house, no money, no explanation. I had to crash on a friend's couch, beg for extra shifts at the shop. Do you know what that's like?" The market faded around us. It was just him and me, the air thick with unspoken pain. I could feel eyes on us now, whispers starting. "You said you were waiting for me to die," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "I heard you on the phone. That house was my life, Alex, our life. But you reduced it to an inheritance." Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the raw truth of it. He recoiled, color draining from his face. "That was a stupid joke. I didn't mean it like that. I was venting to a friend." We moved to a nearby bench, the confrontation unfolding like a dam breaking. He admitted the pressure, debts from bad investments, a failed relationship, feeling stuck in my shadow. "I took you for granted," he said, his voice cracking. "But running away, selling everything, that hurt more than anything." I told him about the years of sacrifice, the loneliness after his father died, how his words had been the final straw. "I needed to live for me," I said, "not as your safety net." The intensity built as emotions poured out, anger, regret, love tangled in accusations. Passers-by glanced our way, and I wondered what they saw, a mother and son, broken but perhaps mending. As the sun dipped lower, Alex asked to see the cottage. We walked in silence, the path crunching under our feet. Inside, he looked around at my simple life, the paintings on the walls, the notebook on the table. "This is you now," he said quietly. "I get it. But can we start over?" I didn't answer right away, the question hanging like a fragile thread. In that moment, I realized the true climax wasn't his arrival, but the choice ahead. Forgiveness or freedom, or maybe both. The cottage door creaked open as Alex stepped inside, his presence filling the small space like an uninvited memory. He paused in the living room, eyes scanning the walls adorned with my paintings. The olive tree, a sunset over the vineyards, each stroke a testament to the woman I'd become. "These are good, Mom," he said softly, tracing the frame of one with his finger. "I didn't know you could do this. I busied myself making tea, the kettle's whistle piercing the tension, giving me a moment to steady my breath. At 62, I'd learned that silence could be a shield, but today, it felt like a bridge waiting to be crossed. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd written my lists of new beginnings, now cluttered with cups and unspoken words. Alex fiddled with his spoon, avoiding my gaze. "I didn't come to drag you back," he started, his voice measured, as if he'd rehearsed this on the plane. "I came because I needed to see if you were okay, and to say I'm sorry. Not just for that phone call, for everything, for leaning on you too long, for not seeing you as a person, not just Mom." His admission hung in the air, raw and unpolished. I thought of the nights I'd lain awake back home, wondering if he'd ever grow up, if my sacrifices had enabled his stagnation rather than his strength. "I heard you that night," I said, my words deliberate, like placing stones in a path. It wasn't just words, Alex. It was the culmination of years, me giving, you taking, without a thought to the cost. He nodded, tears welling, and for the first time I saw vulnerability, not entitlement. He spoke of his own struggles, the auto shop job that drained him, the debts from impulsive choices, the fear of failing like his father had in business ventures. "I said that stupid thing because I was scared," he confessed. "Scared of building my own life, so I waited for yours to end. It was cowardly." The conversation deepened as the afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the floor. We dissected our shared history, not with blame, but with a quiet intelligence born of hindsight. I shared how widowhood had forced me into survival mode, how I'd buried my dreams under the weight of motherhood. But disappearing, I explained, was my way of reclaiming them, not to punish you, but to save myself. Alex listened, really listened, and in that exchange I felt a shift, a mutual recognition that family bonds aren't chains, but choices renewed daily. As evening fell, we walked the hills together, the air crisp with the scent of earth and grapes. "What now?" he asked, stopping at a viewpoint overlooking the valley. I considered the question, my mind weaving threads of possibility. "You go back, build your garage like you wanted, but on your terms, not mine." He smiled faintly. "And you? Stay here painting?" I nodded. "For now, but maybe visit, if we both earn it." It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation, but a realistic one. Forgiveness tempered with boundaries, love redefined by independence. Alex left the next morning, hugging me tightly at the train station. "I love you, Mom, and I'm proud of you." As his train pulled away, I returned to the cottage, the solitude no longer empty, but enriched. I picked up my brush, adding a figure to the olive tree painting, a distant silhouette, walking toward the horizon. In that act, I understood. True freedom isn't vanishing. It's choosing who walks beside you, even from afar. The house I'd sold was gone, but in its place, I'd built something enduring, a life of my own design, where betrayal birthed rebirth. And perhaps in time, Alex would build his too.